Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to business continuity, resilience, emergency management, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there, so I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today, we have a couple of different topics we're going to talk about, and I'd like to welcome back to the show someone who many of you know and have seen before at conferences. I know that's where I run into her all the time, lately, that's for sure. Marie-Helene Primeau from Premier Continuum. Marie, welcome back.
Well, thank for having me at the show.
I think this is your fourth appearance, not including interviews at conferences.
I don't know. You're keeping the count.
I don't think we need to go through an introduction. I think a lot of people know who you are, and you have lots of friends and colleagues in the industry. So why don't we just jump straight into our topics today?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, our first one, we're going to talk about top risks and tools. Organizations are evolving. Different risks are out there now: climate change, cyber attacks, and IT outages. And there's all kinds of different tools out there uh, to monitor media, AI, and different early warning systems. So I'm just wondering, how do these tools help and how can they help business continuity or resilience professionals?
Well, I mean, as a principal, it's really important to keep, at stake as to what could be happening. If you look at standards such as the crisis management standard, the ISO 22361, demonstrates how it's important to anticipate disruption. So if you're just focused on preparing for the things you know about, well, you're going to be missing, a lot of things that could actually be happening. So anticipating is really key. We know our schedule is really busy, so being on the lookout of what can be happening, can be cumbersome. We're scarce on resources. So if we have access to tools, it will help us in keeping abreast. Tools can be technology. You talked about AI, so obviously knowing the risks that AI can pose to our operations are, but also it can also help us in understanding, well, all of this wealth of information that's available out there to keep us informed based on the risk that we're concerned about or the exposure that we have. So tools will help us in gathering the information. It could be subscribing to early warning systems. I was listening to individuals mentioning that they have, if they're, in California, they get obviously some notices regarding earthquake that can be, instrumental in saving lives. So being connected to those really early warning system, looking at tornadoes and hurricane watch, so that can give you that extra minute or your extra hours or days just to make yourself, ready so that your state of readiness is better than it would normally be. Um, Also, so tools don't necessarily mean that they're expensive. If we're thinking of, if you have the luxury of having subscription to media monitoring, well, if maybe you don't have necessarily the budget, but maybe someone in corporate affairs or public relations have access to that. So if you can be on the lookout to what they're currently looking, it could be regarding your organization, but maybe they can subscribe to additional information so that you're aware of what's going on. If we think back as what was going on with COVID back in 2020, well, there are people that were looking more what was happening in China and started buying masks and lots of stuff in advance before the resources became scarce. So it is important to, if you're abreast of what's going on, it can definitely help in getting ready. Another element as well. So there's those tools that can help you in knowing what's going on, but also research documents or like the BCI produces on an annual basis the Horizon Scan. It asks other professionals in the industry, what they're expecting. There are people from around the world that are contributing to those reports. So it can give you a heads up as to what were the incidents that occurred in the past year, but also what could be happening in the next year or 10 years. Another source we were just discussing before starting our call today was the global risk report that's issued by the World Economic Forum. Again, it's always important to know when the survey was conducted. So that survey it's the one that's published in January of each year, and they typically conduct the survey back in September, October of the previous year. And what was interesting in this year's report, it was actually mentioning elements that didn't used to be on the horizon, such as the geopolitical um, geo-economic confrontation. So that's actually one that was not in the horizon before. And state-based armed conflicts, obviously, this evolves depending on what's going on in the media, what's going on in the political world. But those are things that we need to be on the lookout because they may have impact on the continuity of our operations and all the different measures that we need to be implementing. So definitely, cyber espionage and warfare, rather than just being cyber security, can also be something that we need to be cognizant about. So really looking at those tools really broadens our horizon, make sure that if we've already kind of anticipated those types of disruptions, well, it may skew the way that we develop the plans, how we interact with our different stakeholders, and the conversation that we can also have with our executives, and that'll lead into further topics that we'll talk together later on this show.
And we don't always have to have the most expensive tools because you kind of alluded to that too. We could just be paying attention to news and we can set up alerts on Google or join some reputable, shall we say, and trustworthy news groups on social media to keep tabs on things too. We don't necessarily have to have these big tools that are out there, right? We can leverage some of the things that are already there.
Exactly. But it's really to be on the lookout of those, because if you're just working in isolation and always, planning the way you've always done, well, the world is evolving, and either like AI can be introducing new risks, but also can give you some opportunities to even help you in getting a summary of what those news are in the media, for example.
How can some of these tools help us with our daily activities, like with testing or BIAs? So because some of the things that we do, there's a lot of data and information. So how can we leverage these tools with some of those practices that we're already doing?
Well, again, it's when you're having that conversation with the stakeholders. Well, if you are aware of what can go on, what's going on in the media, that it's not just coming from you saying, well, we should get ready because there's more and more cyber attack. For example, if you bring up the World Economic Forum, the Global Risk Report, the BCI Rise and Scam, well, it gives you more credibility and hopefully more embracing of business continuity, that people aren't just doing it because they have to do it for compliance purposes. So they'll understand better the value of doing the business impact analysis and the context in which we may need to be activating it. And it's not if ever we activate it, but it's more when we will. So I think it puts them in the right mindset of having those tools and having an informed conversation. Again, when we're doing the testing as well, will help us in building those scenarios. Bringing credible situations that could occur, so that people really, invest the proper energy in doing the exercises. It could give you examples of scenarios. You can even take some news excerpts for making it more, credible, the actual scenario that you're bringing forward as
Is
well.
there anything we should watch out for with these tools? Specifically, I'm talking about AI because so many people think if they use AI, everything they get is going to be perfect. But is there anything we should really watch out for and be careful of?
There's lots to be careful about AI. Um, Someone mentioned to me that they were using AI to help them in writing an article, and they actually asked the tool for sources, and the AI actually gave sources, but those sources were false. And it was still at one point, asking a AI, artificial intelligence, it's like asking a school age student and asking, well, what's the answer? So it'll give you an answer regardless. It may be false, but it's going to give you an answer. So be careful. Always validate the information you're getting. Even if you ask for sources, well, go and look at the sources if they actually are true, because they really look valid. I was really, concerned by the fact that it provided false sources. But it can be incredible for writing your exercises because it can help you in building, that fake news report, and you'll just give some injects and it's actually going to generate a news article that looks so credible, like it looks true. So it can definitely be useful, like it can help in encompassing, but obviously there's also be careful about confidentiality of the information and information you put into the tool, because if there was a cyber attack onto those tools, well, even if it's private, there could be a leakage of information. So be careful not to integrate the name of your company or use tools that have been approved by your organization, because there can be some sensitive information that is shared. And I'd add to that, so from that perspective of leakage of information, but also if you're using more and more AI in your regular business, well, you'll have to think about recovering those AI tools as well if ever there's a disaster. So don't forget that the more it's embedded within the business.
Mhm. Is there, I was just thinking as you were talking about how we use some of that information, is there a risk that if we are doing some sort of exercise or activity, I should say, where we're using AI to develop a list of contingencies, that we take that uh, we take that as, oh, that must be true. We can do all these things. And then we run a risk that we're not really building contingency plans or response plans to meet the organization. We're just coming up with a bunch of stuff that looks good to audit and compliance. Oh, yeah, you got a list of 20 things here, but none of that really applies to us. So even though we're using AI, do you think we run a risk that we still need to have the knowledge there from people? We can't just use one over the other. They have to complement each other.
Of course, and really, I don't normally use, like, I'll use AI for prompts, like to help in, idea generation, but I wouldn't rely on AI to give me answers and just, look blindly at them.
Yeah.
They could be, like, I haven't tried what you just mentioned of doing, but if it's, let's say you were, having a policy written by AI, well, you need to make sure that it's applicable and that you actually need to that it makes sense with your organization. So yes, you can't just send it blindly to the auditors.
Do you have any, we're getting close to the end here of our first segment already. We have 2 minutes left, believe it or not. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with regards to tools or risks that we need to be aware of?
Well, I think it's important to follow a process when you're looking at your risk of analyzing, well, what are the potential risks and hazards that you could be subject to, and making sure that you do measure, like, your evaluate your sensitivity or your the probability and impact of those risks, as well as also, and sometimes people tend to measure their risks based on the residual risk, but they need to be careful. And going back to your point regarding solutions, well, if the actual solutions that you think you've implemented to reduce that risk aren't necessarily functional, well, you could be exposing yourself to something that's greater than your actual, what you think your risk is. And to that point, going back to impact and probability, well, it's always a guesswork because historical data has a limited value, but still, look at what can happen, look, how it applies to your organization. Just don't go just saying all these risks. They might not all apply, or you might have some measures that are reducing it from your organization. So there's work that still needs to be happening from a professional.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking with Marie-Helene Primeau today. And in our next segment, we are going to talk about the role of business continuity plans. And we'll be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.